Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mauricio. I'm a senior manager at VMware, and we're going to talk a little bit about how to ingress with any Kubernetes using NSX Advanced Load Balancer, or AVI. So this is a disclaimer. There's nothing new here. What we're going to talk about today is some challenges that we've been seeing customers having when they're trying to do container ingress and different flavors of Kubernetes clusters, and how NSX Advanced Load Balancer, or AVI, can address those challenges. And also, what I'm going to bring here is how can you actually install AVI and the benefits you can have when you have AVI as your ingress controller. And just for a show of hands here, how many of you actually have been working with Kubernetes and have Kubernetes clusters? All of you. So nice to know that you probably have some of these challenges. And what we see today is mostly when we have Kubernetes clusters, you need ingress controllers, you need your applications to be available outside. And what we see is that usually a Kubernetes cluster is a different infrastructure separated from the rest of your load balancing infrastructure, your network infrastructure, where you have, for example, an F5 load balancer and you have something for WAF or whatever. And you have inside your Kubernetes cluster an ingress controller, whatever it may be, maybe HA proxy, Nginx. And this leads to multiple discrete solutions. You have complex operations. You don't have observability end-to-end because sometimes you have different teams controlling what happens inside the Kubernetes and a different team covering what is outside of the Kubernetes. And what we also have because of that is partial automation. Inside the Kubernetes cluster, automation is given, right? You have all this automation occurs, but if you need to do any configuration outside, this is not easily automated. So what we bring with NSX Advanced Load Balancer is a single load balancing solution that can bring together all your load balancing needs. Not only for ingress controller, we can do WAF, we can do global server load balancing, DNS needs. So whatever you need, not only for the Kubernetes controller, your other load balancer needs, AVI or NSX Advanced Load Balancer, it can do it for both worlds. And with this, you have an integrated solution. It's simple. We can have this rich observability. I have a demo at the end that I'm going to show you how we can do this, how you leverage this. And it's a scalable, flexible solution, which is fully automated. So it's very easy to use it and automate it end-to-end. So if you need WAF, you need to do anything, you automate it, you can use it, still continue using your Kubernetes API to do all your configurations. So this is where we want to go. So how do you do that? How do you achieve it? Because we have multiple flavors, you have multiple ways to deploy your Kubernetes clusters. You might be on-premise, you might be on native clouds. It doesn't matter. We support AVI or NSX Advanced Load Balancer as an ingress controller in whichever environment you may be running. So I'm going to cover here the different ways you might be running Kubernetes and how you would deploy this ingress controller in these different environments, because we support all of them. And the configuration is different depending on this. And what I try to do in this presentation is try to get all our documentation and make it easier for you to get it, look at your environment, and see what you have to do to make it work on your specific environment. So this is our architecture for AVI inside a Kubernetes cluster. We have this operator called AVI Kubernetes operator. So what we do is we run a pod inside your Kubernetes cluster that simply translates all your Kubernetes APIs to AVI objects. So it listens to the Kubernetes API. When you create an ingress object, it will translate, it will call the AVI controller API, and will program the service engines, which is the data plane. We have a distributed data plane in the AVI controller. We have a distributed architecture for the our load balancer, which we have a controller. Service engines are the data plane. And then it programs the data plane according to what happens in the Kubernetes APIs. So it doesn't change anything in the Kubernetes, what you're doing. It's simply your developers continue doing whatever they're used to doing. And in terms of compatibility, we're compatible with all recent Kubernetes versions. Can be TKG, VMware versions, it can be vanilla, OpenShift, doesn't matter. We support lots of CNIs and all these different Kubernetes, IaaS providers, and even native Kubernetes service, AKE, GKE, AKS. So it doesn't matter. You can use our Ingress services for whichever flavor of Kubernetes you want. And it's how to install it. This is something that might be hard, but it's not as hard as it may seem. So to install it, first thing you need to do is create a namespace for this pod to run in, and then you have to add this Helm repo. And after you add this Helm repo, we need to create this values.yaml file. And we need to work on this values.yaml file. This is the hardest part, so I broke this down, this values.yaml file, to try to make it easier for you, because this is where I see lots of customers having a little bit of difficulty understanding what they need to do with this value.yamls file. So basically what you need to do is, it's a big file, but this is the main parameters that you need to look for. And I'm going to call out here, there's this layer 7 only, if you're only doing Ingress, but you can also do service type load balancer, if you want to do layer 4 and layer 7. The most important thing here is the one that we call service type, the second to last, which sets the pod connectivity strategy. It's the next slide, I'm going to detail that. But the other ones are credentials. If it's going to be default Ingress controller, you can have more than one Ingress controller. The VIP network, so the virtual IPs that you're going to use to expose your services, CNI plugin, the cluster name. These are different parameters that are not easy, but the hardest one is the default, the service type. So for service type, this varies, because what happens is our load balancers, different from other Ingress controllers that they run as pods, our load balancer, our service engines, they are VMs in your infrastructure. So they need to have reachability to your pods. So that reachability is how you reach your pods. You need to set how that will work with this service type setting. And it can be 3 ways. You can use, I'm going right to left. You can use a node port, that you expose those pods as a node port, and that is very flexible, it's very easy, but you have some drawbacks because you cannot have persistence, you cannot, since you're exposing it using the node port, you cannot do health checks. You can also use cluster IP. Cluster IP is good, but you have to do some static routes because you will need static routes to have connectivity to the pods. The node port local is like a mixture of those. It's the best one if you're using a private infrastructure. So if you're in a VMware infrastructure where you need to do a cluster IP, but you do not have to require those static routes, I'd suggest node port local. And we can chat a little bit later if you want to understand these later. These a little bit more, since we need, this is a very short tech talk. I want to show you the rest of the slides and the demo that I have. So once you have that, values.yaml, all you have to do is Helm install, set that values.yaml with the credentials, and it will get installed. And that pod will talk to the AVI controller, and you have your Ingress controller set. Once you do that, you can start consuming and deploying applications. So I have this demo. I have an application. This is an application. DNS is not working. It sets DNS automatically. So I have an application YAML file that already has a host name that's yelp.avi.mamorim.com. corp, and I'm going to apply it. It's creating, right at the end, you can see it created in Ingress. So this is my AVI controller. I just applied a YAML file, and I'm checking if my pods are already created. They're created, and you see a new VIP was created, a new virtual service. This virtual service, now the DNS name, it's already working. You see it created the DNS, and my application started working. So what's nice here is I can now start working with my application. It's working. I'm interacting with it. So Kubernetes is nice because it's very easy to deploy an application. And now I'd like to show you the rich visibility and analytics that we have. For example, I can go here and try to see all my logs. So every transaction that you have, every time I clicked, I can see end-to-end timing. So it took 26 milliseconds each request. I can see where it came from, which server, if I had load balancing, how long it took. So I saw this is the URI. So I have all this rich visibility to know how long it took. And this is what we see that customers struggle a lot because you don't have end-to-end visibility. And just having this solution as an Ingress controller, you have like this end-to-end visibility with analytics. For if your application is low, you look at this dashboard, you can do search, you have these log analytics. It's very easy to pinpoint and see, no, I know it's slow because my application is slow, my network is slow. We have this integrated analytics, and as you saw, I didn't need to do anything. Just apply my YAML file, and everything's working with analytics. And if you have multiple clusters, we have AMKO, which is the multi-cluster Kubernetes operator, where we can load balance applications among multiple clusters, where we leverage GSLB, Global Server Load Balance, that's based on DNS, so we can have your application among multiple clusters, and you can have availability. So we have DNS, GSLB, and load balancing your application among multiple clusters. So that's something we can also do. So we have AKO, single cluster, AMKO with multiple clusters. That's what I had. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I can talk to you later. Please take the survey. Thank you very much.